Sawyer Golt had 40 seconds before someone in the lobby of Pelton Group's Columbus Tower decided he didn't belong there. He knew at the moment the revolving door pushed him out of the September cold and into the marble and glass atrium where the air smelled like money, the kind of money that hadn't been earned in a garage. His jacket had a faded patch on the left sleeve where his Ford Motor badge used to clip. His work boots had dried mud from the lot behind his shop. He hadn't had time to change. He hadn't been planning to come here today at all, not until he got Mrs. Okafor's message that she couldn't watch Charlie because her sister in Dayton had taken a bad fall. So Charlie was with him, 7 years old, holding a green plastic brontosaurus in one hand and Sawyer's index finger in the other, sneakers squeaking against the polished floor in a rhythm that didn't belong here. "It's really shiny," Charlie said, looking up at the ceiling. "It is." "Shiny like our bathroom?" "Chinière." Charlie considered this with the solemnity of someone being asked to compare two important things. Then he nodded. "Okay." The reception desk stretched across the back wall like something from an airport. Sleek black granite, two women in matching gray blazers, a row of touchscreens no one was using. Sawyer walked up. The woman on the right scanned him the way people sometimes scanned him when he showed up at a client's house before they knew what his old job had been. Jacket, jeans, the boy. Back to the jacket. "Can I help you?" "I need to see Warren Prescott." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's about the Millhaven property, the recreation center." Something shifted behind her eyes. Quick, calculating. "Mr. Prescott doesn't take walk-in meetings. If you have a business inquiry, you can submit it through the website, and someone from the property division will." "I've submitted 3. I've left 11 voicemails over 2 weeks." Sawyer kept his voice even. "Nobody called back. The signing is today. I need 5 minutes with Prescott before he signs anything." She picked up the phone. "I'm a trustee." He set the manila folder on the desk between them. "The Golt Family Trust holds a legal veto right over any commercial sale of that property above $10 million. Pelton Group is about to sell it for 30. Without my written consent, that deal cannot close." She stopped dialing, looked at the folder, looked at him. "A trustee," she said. "That's right." She set the phone down carefully and turned to speak into her headset. Sawyer waited. Charlie pressed against his leg and studied the enormous abstract painting on the wall. Something red and sharp, 20 feet wide, and probably worth more than the garage. "What is it?" Charlie asked. "Art." "What kind?" "The expensive kind." Charlie looked at it a moment longer. "Ours is better." He meant the drawing taped above the workbench back home. A blue dinosaur holding a wrench, which Charlie had made the previous winter and insisted on calling Dad at work. Sawyer had kept it up ever since. He almost smiled. Then the door near the elevator opened. 2 men in security uniforms materialized from a side corridor. They moved quietly, the way men move when they've done something so many times it stopped requiring thought. "Sir." The taller one stopped 4 feet away. "I'm going to need you to step outside." "I haven't done anything. This is a private lobby. I'm here on legal business. I'm the controlling trustee of a family land trust with standing to halt a transaction this company is about to complete. I'm asking for 5 minutes with Warren Prescott before your legal department becomes very expensive. Someone from the property division can. The signing is at 11. It's 10:42. The tightness in Sawyer's chest was something he'd been managing since the subway. He'd known it would go this way. He'd known they'd see the jacket and the boots and be done with him in 3 seconds. He'd known it and come anyway because there was no other option. "By the time your property division gets around to returning my calls, there won't be anything to discuss." The second guard moved to his left side, unhurried, professional. Charlie made a small sound and pressed tighter against Sawyer's leg. Then the elevator chimed. The man who stepped out was 62, silver-haired, wearing a charcoal suit that had been cut by someone who charged by the millimeter. He was mid-sentence to a younger man in wire-rimmed glasses, gesturing with one hand, leather portfolio in the other. He didn't notice Sawyer until Sawyer spoke. "Mr. Prescott." His voice came out flat and clear and stopped everything. Prescott turned. His eyes moved through the scene the way a man's eyes do when he's learned to assess situations before committing to a reaction. The guards, the manila folder on the desk, the little boy, Sawyer's jacket. "Who are you?" Pleasant voice, controlled. Sawyer told him everything. The trust, the 1983 deed, the veto provision his grandfather had written in when he donated the land, the fact that the controlling interest had passed to him 2 weeks ago when his father's estate finally closed. The 11 voicemails, the 2 weeks of silence. Prescott listened with his face very still. "Security," he said, without looking away from Sawyer. "Call the police." "Mr. Prescott, this man is trespassing and attempting to interfere with a scheduled corporate transaction. Matter of fact, no heat in it, somehow worse for that. Have him removed. The trust documents are right here. Take 30 seconds. "I don't need 30 seconds. Prescott turned back to wire-rimmed glasses. "We have a meeting." The guards had Sawyer by the arms before he could say another word. Charlie yelped, small, sharp, the sound of a child realizing that things were no longer okay. "Don't touch my son." Sawyer pulled his right arm free and stepped between Charlie and the taller guard. "I'll come. Don't touch him." Charlie wasn't crying yet, but his face had gone pale and his knuckles had gone white around the brontosaurus, and he was looking at his father the way he'd looked at him at Kate's graveside 3 years ago. Like the world had just demonstrated again that it could do whatever it wanted to the people you loved. Sawyer crouched down, right there on the marble floor, with the guards waiting and Prescott already turning away. "Hey," he put his hands on Charlie's shoulders. "Look at me. I need you to be brave for about 10 minutes. Can you do that?" "Are they going to arrest you?" "Maybe, but it'll be okay." "You always say that." "Because it's usually true." Charlie's jaw set in that way it had, too adult for a 7-year-old, the way it had been since the hospital. He was working very hard at something. "Okay," he said finally. "Good man." They walked Sawyer out. Through the lobby glass, he could see Charlie standing near the desk, clutching his dinosaur, watching. Sawyer kept his eyes on him until the cruiser door closed. The holding cell at the Columbus 1st District stations smelled like cleaning solution and yesterday's coffee. Sawyer sat on the bench and stared at the floor and thought about the Millhaven Recreation and Learning Center. The scuffed linoleum in the main gym. The hand-painted mural in the kids' wing that a group of high school students had done 3 summers ago. The after-school tutoring that 40-some kids from the trailer park off Route 9 attended every Tuesday and Thursday because there was nowhere else to go. The pediatric clinic in the East Wing, the only one within 30 miles that took Medicaid for children's care, that didn't make families feel the weight of what they couldn't afford. He thought about Charlie. 3 years ago, 2 in the morning, 38-degree weather. Charlie burning with fever and breathing wrong. Kate had been gone 8 months, and Sawyer had carried his son through those clinic doors with no insurance card because he'd let the policy lapse in the fog of grief and paperwork and learning to do everything alone. The doctor on call had looked at Charlie first and asked about coverage second. That had mattered. That still mattered. His father, Raymond Golt, had never said a word about the trust in 38 years. Raymond had been a union welder. Quiet, self-contained, drove the same truck for 20 years, died of a cardiac arrest on I-70 when Sawyer was 26, and already 3 years into his engineering career at Ford. By then, Sawyer was engaged to Kate, building a life in Dearborn that looked nothing like Millhaven. He'd come back for the funeral. Then he'd left. He hadn't come back to stay until Kate's cancer changed what staying anywhere meant. The trust documents had been in a fireproof lockbox in his father's storage unit, a box Sawyer had been putting off for 2 years because going through it meant finishing the job of closing a man's life. When he finally did it last month, he found the trust agreement folded inside a sealed envelope with his name on the front in his father's careful block lettering. He'd spent a week reading everything, then he'd started making calls. The cell door opened. A woman in her late 50s stood in the corridor, small, precise in movement, navy blazer, reading glasses on a chain. She carried a briefcase that had seen 30 years of hard use and wore it like a credential. Sawyer Golt. Not a question. My name is Loretta Vane. Vane and Associates, Columbus. Your father retained our firm in 2009. Sawyer looked at her. My father's been dead for 12 years. I know. He retained us to monitor specific conditions related to the Millhaven property. When those conditions were triggered, when Pelton Group filed notice of intent to sell, a standing instruction he'd left with us came into effect. She sat across the table without waiting to be asked. He wanted you to have representation if this day ever came. He never mentioned any of this. No. Loretta opened her briefcase with a deliberate click. I met your father twice. Both times he drove up from Millhaven in the same truck, paid the consultation fee in cash, and said about as many words as were strictly necessary. But every year for 12 years, even after he was gone, through an automatic disbursement from an account he'd set aside, the retainer came. She looked at him steadily. He knew this day was possible. He made sure you wouldn't be alone in it. Sawyer was quiet for a moment. Why is the trust worth a veto, right, if it doesn't generate any income, he asked. Someone's going to ask that. Because your grandfather wasn't a rich man. He donated that land because he believed it belonged to the community, not to anyone's portfolio. But he wasn't naive. He'd seen enough of the world to know that a handshake and a deed of gift could both be undone if no one was left to object. So he kept the legal protection. Loretta's voice was matter-of-fact. The trust holds no liquid assets. It has no dividends, no distributions, no cash value of any kind. What it holds is a single legal right, the right to say no to the wrong sale. Your father couldn't exercise it. He didn't know you well enough to explain it, or he didn't know how to explain it, and then he ran out of time. So he paid a lawyer to wait. Sawyer looked at the ceiling, thought about his father driving up to Columbus in the same truck, paying cash, saying as few words as necessary. Can you stop the signing? He said. Already done. Emergency injunction filed 20 minutes ago. The moment Pelton Group attempts to execute any wire transfer related to this property, every connected account gets frozen. Loretta stood. Now, tell me what you've found, and then we're going back to that building with paperwork they cannot shred. They walked into the lobby at 12:40. The receptionist recognized Sawyer immediately. Her hand moved toward the phone. Don't. Loretta set a document on the granite counter before the woman could lift the receiver. Filed notice of legal standing, Franklin County Court of Common Pleas, and a copy of the injunction currently in effect. Mr. Golt is the controlling trustee of the Golt Family Trust. We're here to exercise that authority. The receptionist stared at the document. She picked up the phone and spoke very quietly. After a moment, someone will come down. They waited. A man in his mid-40s came from the elevator, lean, efficient, a lanyard reading Glenn Farber, Chief of Staff. He looked at Loretta first, then at Sawyer, then at the document in Loretta's hand. You came back, he said to Sawyer. I told you the deal couldn't close without my signature. Glenn's jaw shifted. Something crossed his face that might have been recognition or might have been resignation. Come with me, he said. The conference room on the 31st floor had a view of the Scioto River and a single slab walnut table that could seat 20. Prescott was there, so were 4 board members ranged against the windows, and at the far end leaned back in his chair with the ease of a man who had not yet realized the ground was moving, was Kyle Denton, CFO, 54 years old, silver at his temples, and a smile that had probably closed 100 deals. Sawyer had looked him up 2 weeks ago. He'd looked up everyone connected to this transaction. Loretta set her briefcase on the table, sat, and didn't wait for an invitation to speak. She walked Prescott through the deed, the trust provision, the legal standing. She was unhurried and exact the way someone is when they've built their case carefully and don't need to oversell it. Denton smiled through most of it. Warren, this is the oldest play in the book. Someone files a motion 2 hours before a signing, waves some papers, hopes the other side blinks. He shook his head. The 1983 deed has been through 3 legal reviews. There's nothing enforceable in it. One of the board members, a woman in her 60s, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, was already reading the document Loretta had slid across the table. The room let her read. Denton kept his easy expression. Prescott watched the board member's face. She set it down. Kyle, this reads as enforceable to me. Sandra reviewed it, and Denton started. Sandra was let go yesterday, Prescott said quietly. A small silence arrived and stayed. Why was she let go? Loretta asked without looking up from her notes. Personnel matter, Denton said. Sandra Chu, your executive assistant of 9 years. Dismissed the day before the closing. Loretta's voice was pleasant and even. That's a notable coincidence. It has nothing to do with this transaction. Then you won't object to us speaking with her. Loretta looked up from her folder. We already have. A millimeter of tension crossed Denton's shoulders. Sawyer caught it. Mr. Denton, Loretta said, the firm acquiring the Millhaven property is Irongate Development Partners. The managing partner of Irongate is a man named Stuart Fenwick. Correct. Stuart Fenwick is married to your sister, Christine. Prescott turned to look at Denton. We're not close, Denton said. The smile held. It's not a material relationship. It was disclosed. You disclosed having a brother-in-law named Stuart. You did not disclose that Stuart is the managing partner of the firm purchasing this specific asset. Loretta laid another document on the table. You also did not disclose that you hold a 4.2% stake in Irongate Development through a holding company incorporated in Delaware. Prescott said, What? The word was quiet and very flat. Passive investment, Denton said quickly. I'm not involved in their operations. I have no influence over. You've been pushing this sale for 6 months. Prescott's voice had dropped. You told me the property was a liability. You commissioned 3 appraisals. The appraisals were legitimate. Independent appraisals put the property at $85 million. Loretta said, You're selling it for 30. Sawyer had been waiting. He'd spent 2 weeks building to this moment in his head, and now that it was here, he felt less satisfaction than he'd expected. Just the need to say the thing clearly, while the room was still quiet enough to hear it. The recreation center serves 400 children, he said. Free tutoring, after-school programs, and the only pediatric clinic in 30 miles that takes Medicaid for kids. If Irongate gets that property, the clinic closes inside 6 months. They flip the real estate and make a fortune off a $55 million margin. And Kyle Denton makes a cut of that fortune because he spent months steering a transaction worth hundreds of millions toward his own brother-in-law's firm. He looked at Denton directly. My son had pneumonia 3 years ago, 2 in the morning. I carried him into that clinic because it was the only place I could take him, and they helped him without asking about the bill first. How many kids like him lose that clinic so you can collect on a deal you were running from inside your own company? Denton's face had gone very still. I want legal, he said now. Good idea. Prescott picked up the phone on the table. 2 sentences. Set it down. You're suspended, effective immediately. He looked at the board members along the windows. I want a full audit of every transaction Kyle touched in the past 3 years. Every communication, every conflict of interest disclosure. His jaw was tight. All of it. Denton stood. He looked at Sawyer, the way a man looks at something that has cost him something he believed he was owed. Then he walked to the glass doors and was gone. Sandra Chu had texted Loretta that morning with 8 words. I have his messages. All of them. Call me. She'd set up Denton's cloud backup 18 months ago when he changed phones. He'd trusted her to handle the migration and never thought to change the access credentials afterward. The text records between Denton and Fenwick were 7 months of planning laid out in plain language, price suppression strategy, timed appraisals, Denton coaching Fenwick on what language to use in bidding presentations. 4 months ago. Prescott trusts me completely. The board follows where he leads. By the time anyone traces the margin, we'll be settled and done. The DA's office had the files by 3 that afternoon. The SEC opened an inquiry before 5. Sawyer drove home through the dark on the 2-lane that cut through flat Ohio farmland, radio off, Charlie asleep in the back seat with the brontosaurus pressed to his chest. He let Loretta's calls go to voicemail and read her texts at the stoplight at the edge of town. Charges filed. Fraud, conspiracy, securities violations, no bail, flight risk. And then, Prescott wants to meet tomorrow. I think you should go. He looked at Charlie in the mirror, sleeping the way kids sleep, utterly, like the rest of the world had simply stopped mattering. He texted back, I'll be there. Prescott met him in a corner office the next morning, no board members, no one from legal. Just Glenn Farber sitting quietly in the corner and 2 cups of coffee on the desk. I owe you an apology, Prescott said. No preamble. I looked at you yesterday, and I decided what you were before you finished your first sentence. I'm old enough to know better. Sawyer waited. I've known Kyle Denton for 14 years, Prescott said. He helped build this company. I've been reading communications since yesterday afternoon, the appraisal timelines he manufactured, the way he framed every conversation about that property over 6 months, and what I keep thinking is how patient he was. He paused. He waited until I trusted him completely. Then he moved. How long had he been planning it? The Delaware Holding Company was incorporated 3 years ago. He started laying groundwork before we'd even begun discussing the sale internally. Prescott looked out the window at the river. I missed it. I'm trying to be honest about that. Sawyer nodded. What do you want? Prescott asked. Whatever is within my authority to provide. Sawyer had thought about this on the drive in. He'd turned the $2 million compensation figure Loretta had mentioned over in his mind for most of the previous night. What he could do with it, what it would change, what it would mean for Charlie. A different apartment, better schools, the things he'd been unable to give because Kate's illness had cost them everything they'd saved, and the garage paid enough to live on, but not enough to build anything. He'd turned it over for a long time and come to the same place every time. The recreation center, he said, don't sell it. Invest in it. Full renovation of the pediatric clinic, new equipment, expanded hours, a sliding scale program, so families don't have to worry about what they can and can't afford. An endowment for the after-school programs, enough that they run for the next 20 years without depending on whoever happens to be CFO at Pelton Group. Prescott looked at him. That's it? There's also a woman named Sandra Chu who lost her job the day before yesterday because Kyle Denton got nervous about what she might know. She's the reason he's in a cell right now. I'd like her to have a position that actually uses what she's capable of. Done. Prescott paused. For you personally, Mr. Golt. Sawyer thought about the garage. The Accord he had to get back to. The alternator job promised for Thursday. Charlie's homework spread across the break room table every afternoon, and the way Charlie always looked up when a customer came in. Curious, cataloging, like the world was a thing to be carefully examined. I'm good, he said. Prescott studied him for a long moment. Then he said, my grandfather started this company. He used to say that the measure of what you built wasn't the square footage. It was whether you left the place better than you found it. He looked at the river. I stopped asking myself that question somewhere along the way. It wasn't an absolution. It wasn't quite a confession. It was just a man telling the truth about himself, which in Sawyer's experience was rarer than it had any right to be. He shook Prescott's hand and went home. 5 months later, on a cold Saturday in February, Sawyer and Charlie stood in the main hall of the newly renovated Mill Haven Recreation and Learning Center while a city council member read a dedication aloud from a podium. New floors, fresh paint. The pediatric clinic had doubled in size, and a new mural filled the children's waiting room. A painted garden in full color. The names of community volunteers worked into the leaves in small gold letters. Charlie had been asked to cut the ribbon, which he had accepted with the gravity of someone being assigned a significant task. He stood at the entrance to the clinic wing with the oversized scissors. In both hands, Sawyer crouched beside him. Ready? Sawyer said. What if I cut it in the wrong place? There's no wrong place. What if it doesn't fall right? Charlie. Okay, a breath. He cut. The ribbon fell. People applauded. Charlie stared at the two halves in his hands, then looked up at Sawyer with pure relief. I didn't mess it up. You didn't mess it up. They walked the new wing together. Bright floors, new equipment, the smell of fresh paint over something that had been there a long time and was still standing. In the waiting room, a mother sat with a toddler on her lap, reading to him from a board book, both of them completely at ease. Sawyer stopped near the dedication plaque mounted on the east wall. Polished bronze, clean letters. This facility restored in partnership with Pelton Group and the Golt Family Trust. In memory of Harold Golt, who believed that land belonged to the people who lived on it. Charlie read it slowly, sounding out the harder words. Then, that's great-grandpa Harold. Yeah. Did you know him? Not really. He died when I was little. Sawyer looked at the letters. but I think I'm starting to understand what he was like. Charlie nodded, satisfied with this, and went back to looking at the mural. Sawyer stood there a moment longer. His father had driven up to Columbus in the same truck every year for 12 years to pay a lawyer to wait for a day that might never come. No explanation, no fanfare, just a quiet, stubborn belief that the thing he'd been given to protect was worth protecting, even if the protection outlasted him, even if he never got to see it matter. On the drive home, Charlie fell asleep in the back seat the way he always did on car rides. The Brontosaurus tucked under one arm. Sawyer drove through the flat farmland in the dark and thought about his father and his grandfather, and the strange, invisible thread connecting a welder in Millhaven to a lawyer in Columbus, to a man in a work jacket who'd walked into the wrong lobby on the right day. Back at the garage, he turned on the lights and made coffee and opened the folder Loretta had sent, the formal documents establishing his ongoing role as trustee, requiring his annual review of any significant Pelton Group transactions involving the Millhaven property. No salary, no title, just a piece of paper that said someone had to keep paying attention and that someone was him. He signed it, closed the folder. Outside, the town was quiet, the way small towns went quiet in winter. Not empty, just resting. Down the street, the lights in the community center were still on. Tuesday tutoring, probably. 40-some kids doing homework at folding tables in the gym, the way they'd been doing all along. The way they'd keep doing for the next 20 years, because a man in mud-caked boots had walked through a lobby he wasn't supposed to be in and refused to leave until someone listened. He turned off the garage lights and went upstairs to make dinner. Some things didn't need a grand ending. Some things just needed someone who showed up when it mattered, and was stubborn enough when everything pushed back not to quit.